Good evening. Hello. How are you? Yeah, you're doing well. Me too. I'm happy to be here always with you. I'm Riley. On behalf of the Godmothers family, welcome to our living room. Welcome to our storefront for magic. We're very grateful that you're seated here out of the rain, under a roof. Good choice, but even better choice to watch a splendid conversation unfold. I'm delighted to introduce Jennifer Rudolph Walsh. She is our fairy godmother of the universe, really, and one of our co-owners. And she has this incredible way of curating a space and making it feel like home. Do you feel it? Me too. Our guest this evening, Susan Orlean, is one of the most distinctive voices in American nonfiction. For more than 3 decades, she has been a staff writer at The New Yorker, where her curiosity has taken her everywhere, from umbrella inventors to gospel choirs, from taxidermists to Tanya Harding, from the lives of animals to the lives of extraordinary everyday people. And she's the best-selling author of 7 books, including The Orchid Thief, which inspired the Oscar-winning film adaptation, as well as Rin Tin Tin. That's so fun to say. Say it. Rin Tin Tin. It's fun. On Animals and the library book. Her writing has been described as a national treasure and luminous in its attention, and her work has shaped how we understand the overlooked corners of American life. She's written for Rolling Stone, Vogue, Esquire, and Outside, taught and mentored writers around the world, hosted acclaimed podcasts, and earned an Emmy nomination for her work on HBO's How To with John Wilson. Today, she continues to write for The New Yorker while running her wildly beloved Substack, Wordy Bird. And tonight, we're here to celebrate her newest book, Joyride, a memoir that traces the wild, tender, funny, and deeply human path of a life spent paying close attention. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Rudolph Walsh and Susan Orlean.
What a beautiful introduction, Riley. Thank you. And welcome, Susan.
I am so happy to be here and so glad you braved the rain. Thank you. I know that's tough. People in California can't handle it.
Well, you know, I was thinking about how to describe my experience reading this memoir, and I think you stole it because it really is a joyride. You know, Susan takes us on this incredible journey through pretty much your entire adult life. And I was just thinking, how does it feel that everybody in this room, or certainly me, pretty much knows everything about your life?
It's a little unnerving, and particularly because, you know, I've made my career out of writing about other people and turning my gaze outward. And really, while I'm a character in my stories, it's never been about me. It's always been about what I'm observing, the people I'm meeting, and so forth. When I sat down to write this book, there was a huge kind of obstacle to me thinking, first of all, why would anybody want to read these details about my life? But also, do I really want to kind of be vulnerable on the page and reveal myself so personally? So I had to definitely get used to it. But as I was saying to you earlier, every now and again I've run into a reader who will refer to something very specific in the book, like they'll mention my first husband by his
So
first
I said
name.
Pete. Then she told me that, and I said Peter.
And you know, and there's a part of me that wants to say, wait, how do you know his
Yeah.
name?
She we were talking with her husband Johnny over there, and she said, and he has an older son. I go, I know. I know he had a son when you got married. So it is a very strange thing because it's like we feel that we know you, but you don't know us. So in some senses, you've brought yourself closer to the reader, haven't you?
Yes, very much. And that is in part why there was a real attraction to me to doing this book. I felt like after these many years of being in conversation with my readers, that it was time to make the conversation more personal and to say, you've come along with me on all of these journeys, all of these adventures since I began my writing career in 1978.
Right.
And so now let me kind of really sit down and be in conversation with you and tell you, how did I get to this place that I find myself?
I love that. And it kind of reads like a master class to a certain extent, but also a little bit about a bygone time, right? Because I love it. You start us with your sort of wild college years, and then you follow the unfolding of your desire to be a writer. So talk a little bit about your early days as a writer.
Well, I inadvertently kind of lucked into a very good moment to want to be a nonfiction writer. When I was coming of age and I was in college and I was discovering Tom Wolfe, Joan Didion, all of these amazing nonfiction writers, it was an inspiration that, you know, what could be more fabulous? And also, it was an era where magazines were healthy and hearty and had lots of pages and lots of writers. I, after college, moved to Portland, Oregon for one reason, which is my boyfriend was moving there. Not a
sound
yes,
reasoning.
Yes. And I was trying to avoid going to law school, which if you were an English major in that era, that was the inevitable trajectory. I had zero interest in going to law school, but what I really wanted was to be a writer, and I didn't know how you did that. So I moved out to Portland with my boyfriend, told my dad, yes, I'm going to go to law school, but I'm just going to take a year and work as a paralegal to get ready.
I literally did the exact same thing.
Yeah,
This
I
is
mean,
so
it was,
crazy.
I think this was going on across America at that moment. And by the way, just as an aside, for the remainder of his life, my dad kept reminding me that it was not too late to go to law school.
Oh, anything good that ever happened to me, my father would say, imagine you could have been a lawyer.
Yeah, right. Well, same.
Yeah.
It was a mentality that
Yeah.
even after I'd written my fourth or fifth book, and my dad kept saying, you know, it's not too late to go to law school. And
Is your dad a lawyer? Because mine was.
Yeah, my dad was a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I finally said to him, you know what, Dad, it is too late. Yeah. It's too late. I'm not going to law school. But I moved to Portland, and this was the era of alternative news weeklies. And there was a very good alternative news weekly in Portland. They hired young people without a lot of experience. So I was perfectly suited to being employed there.
Right. All passion, no experience.
Yes,
It was absolutely
and
perfect.
having extremely cheap rent, so the fact that they paid very little didn't matter. And rather than being a secretary or a messenger or whatever I might have done if I'd moved to New York, I was writing right off the bat. I was told, think of an idea, go out and write it, and it's going to be in the newspaper.
With your name on it.
With my name on it. And it was an amazing place to begin, for sure. This was also the era of Sunday magazines, which now are essentially gone. I mean, every city had a newspaper or two, and every newspaper had a big, fat, glossy Sunday magazine. And those were an amazing, fertile place to write because they ran long stories, they were open to enterprising ideas. So it was a wonderful moment to begin this pursuit of mine. Luckily, I was encouraged from the very beginning. You know, I got this job at the Alternative News Weekly, but then I began freelancing as well, and I was absolutely determined, full of passion, and didn't have the good sense to be insecure.
That's what I actually love about these early days, is that you have such you're on your purpose path, you're so passionate, but you really don't have a lot of self-doubt. Well, you know, you're not like braggadocious, but like you're certain. It's kind of a beautiful thing to watch, the unfolding.
And it's interesting because it's coupled with innocence in a way.
Yeah. Like there's a purity to it. There's a purity to it.
Yeah, I think that I was so sure that I wanted to be a writer. I had no doubt that that's what I wanted to do. That's what I should do. And as a result, I felt perfectly comfortable kind of reaching beyond my station. And I remember one day when I was working at this alternative paper in Portland, and one day I just thought, well, I bet Newsweek could use a stringer in Portland. And back then, Newsweek was a very good publication. Newsweek and Time were in their heyday. And instead of thinking, look, I don't have enough experience, I'm working here in Portland, why would they want me? I picked up the phone and I called the Newsweek bureau in San Francisco. And I said, hi, I work in Portland and I'd like to be your stringer. And I think that the editor was, the guy who ran the bureau, was so surprised. And he said, okay. And so when
I love that. I love that sort of ballsy nature of that. And I wish that our kids lived in a world where they could still do something like that. I mean, we have sons in their early 20s, and that world doesn't really exist for them.
I know. And it is sort of heartbreaking because it really, you didn't go to Indeed.com. You pick up a phone and make a phone call. And look, I was very lucky because I had the guts to sort of present myself and say, look, I'm up here in Portland. I can be your stringer. And in fact, I made them think, wow, we really should have a stringer in Portland.
We need a Portland stringer,
Yeah, now that you mention it, and it's you. But I think that the gatekeeping in the world of employment has changed hugely, and it's just not nearly as permeable as it was back then. But I also think it's important to still appreciate that having that kind of certainty, which isn't braggadocio, I agree with you, it wasn't that at all. I just felt like, well, I know that I am a writer.
Born for this. Yeah, I was born for this.
Yeah.
That's just, that clarity is such a gift, and it's not like you were born to writers. I mean, you just almost had almost a divine sense that this is what I was put on the earth to do.
And I, when I went into my first job interview, I just said, you have to hire me. Because this is the job for me, and it's very funny.
Give it to me.
Right, and it'll be better for both of us if you give it to me. But also, and this was to go back to the idea of innocence, because I was innocent in that way. I had very few clips because I didn't write for my college newspaper. So I was going in for this interview, and I thought, all right, I don't have clips, but I was the editor of my high school yearbook. And I got my yearbook and went marching into this interview. And all I can say is they suppressed their laughter.
Yeah. Until you left the room.
Yeah, yes, and then I'm sure they just thought, let's just hire her just to get her out of here. But it is, and I feel like
Tracy Flick in you.
A little bit.
Flick,
The good parts.
Yes,
the good parts
from the movie Election, which if you haven't seen, you need to. But
yes.
You were going to march in there and get the job done, whether they liked it or not.
Yeah, and I think it was coupled with this feeling that I was a writer and I just needed someone to give me that opportunity, but that it was, and that's not something I think everybody is fortunate to have. I'm not sure everybody wakes up at age, 18 saying, I know what I want to be.
Yeah, I am this.
Yeah, and I was very lucky that it was so clear to me.
Yeah.
And when I did one of those Myers-Briggs tests, it said that I should be a forest ranger. And I thought, no, not working for me. No.
Work. But you also do seem very intuitive, and I would sort of call that divine inspiration. Even the way you get your stories, especially early on, before you were known for these quirky subjects, you were sort of like, huh, Maybe I will do that. Talk a little bit about sort of the way you get your ideas, but take us back a little bit, because when you first started doing sort of these more quirky subjects, it even surprised yourself, didn't it?
Absolutely. I think certainly when you have the sort of feeling that you want to be a writer, what you're thinking about is, I want to craft beautiful sentences and I want to have adventures, but you don't yet realize that part of that means you have to begin thinking about, what do you want to write about? What makes a good story? Early on, my first writing job, I was like, tell me what I should write about. And they said, no, it doesn't work that way. You figure out what to write about. And the adage that young writers are often told is, write what you know. And I thought, I'm 23. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Like, I literally don't know anything. But the thing I did know is that I liked learning about things.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, I liked following curiosity. I liked being surprised by the world. I wasn't looking to confirm what I knew or what I already appreciated. I liked that tension of, I don't understand this, and now I want to learn about it.
Yeah.
And it led me to two very different species of stories. One, which I call Who Knew, and that is stumbling onto a subculture, a topic, a passion that I didn't even know existed. And having that impulse of, I had no idea people collected orchids. I had no idea people were obsessed with taxidermy. And that feeling of...
And pre-internet especially. I mean, now it's all about these microcultures, right? But before that, you were just literally discovering something that nobody had any, awareness to.
Right. And it was a little harder to stumble on things. You had to actually be out in the world and read signs on bulletin boards and, read the back section of newspapers and actively look for those subcultures you didn't know existed.
Yeah. And so you knew you were onto something with subcultures, though. That was like a breadcrumb for you.
Yeah,
right?
Very much.
So who knew, right?
And
because it's interesting. Openness is correlated with aliveness, and you said curiosity. It's interesting. I can see your little trifecta of openness, curiosity, and how it made you feel alive.
Absolutely. I would love that feeling of thinking, I had no idea this existed, and I'm passing into this new world with a whole new kind of language and sensibility, and it was so exciting to me. It was so interesting that I loved the idea of saying to the reader, I've just stumbled onto this private world that you may have not known existed. I certainly didn't know it existed. I'm going to go there, and then I'll tell you what I've learned.
Amazing. Like, you won't believe this.
Yeah, and that was that sensation of sitting around a table with friends going, you're never going to believe.
I love that. I love that.
The other species of story, which I love just as much, which I refer to as hiding in plain sight, and that is the story about things that seem absolutely ordinary, that you've seen a million times, that you never take into consideration, but then you stop and think about it for a minute, and it becomes fascinating.
Yeah, so it's the opposite of who knew. It's like you thought you knew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And,
right.
Whether, in the case of my book, the library book, that originated with me being in a library one day and suddenly thinking, I've been in libraries thousands of times, but I've never actually stopped to think about how they work and what is the day-to-day life of a library like. And the more I thought about it, the more fascinating it seemed. Like, how...
It's like Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
Like, it just blows your mind.
Yeah. And then as it happened in the course of sort of becoming fascinated by this rather ordinary part of life.
And this is the LA...
LA library.
Right.
Then I shouldn't say it was lucky, because the LA library fire was not lucky, but for me as a writer, discovering that there was this dramatic event, the largest library fire in American history, that had occurred at that library, made what had begun as a hiding in plain sight story turn into this very interesting narrative that had drama and, tragedy and historical kind of meaning.
Amazing. Do you ever get like halfway or whatever down the road on something and realize now it's not alive for me anymore? Like my curiosity is not continuing?
I always worry about that because it's a big commitment, especially with a book.
Yeah.
But even with doing a magazine piece, you can, I think, number one, you always lose nerve a little bit, where you begin thinking, is this as interesting as I think?
Right. It's like when you're first going into the ocean and those first 3 little waves that kind of make you feel like, do I really need to do this?
Yeah.
And then once you're in, you're good, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And usually I think through the story choices so thoroughly that by the time I commit, I've considered it deeply and thought, maybe not. Is it really as interesting as I think? But what overrides that is this sort of itchy feeling where I think, but I really kind of want to know.
Yeah.
I really do want to figure this out. And I feel it's just a gut intuitive response to feeling like I really do want to know a little more about this. I can't quite put it aside. And interestingly, I just signed a contract to do a new book. And I put it through all of these same kind of, maybe it's not so interesting, maybe I don't want to do another book, maybe it's not really a good idea, maybe no one will want to read it. And then, but I just kept coming back to the same feeling of, but I kind of really want to learn about this subject. So much so that I couldn't put it aside.
Amazing. So is it a who knew or is it a hiding in plain sight?
I think it's a little bit of both, actually. Would you say? It's both literally in plain sight. I won't say too much about it, but it's the quite amazing story of one particular apartment building. And,
God, murders in the building?
Kind of. So it's a building that, hundreds of people walk by all the time. So it's very much in plain sight. But its story is so complex and fascinating and unexpected that I just kind of can't not do it.
I love it. I love it. I love that story. I hope it's the Dakota, but don't tell us.
Oh. That's funny because I actually, when I was describing it to somebody, I did say, it would be sort of like if and I think there's a book about the Dakota, actually. But, I kind of love how buildings can be these very contained worlds that are like little universes. And also they have layers and layers of history, especially a place like the Dakota. But, you feel the sort of DNA that lingers from everybody who's passed through. And yet it's also this very contained world. So it's very appealing to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And you talk about the thing about Judaism that you love is the belief that each person is a whole world. So
very much. And, it's really that same idea that each individual contains the entire universe. And that is why the loss of any person is such a deep kind of rift in the world, because we each are unto ourselves a kind of universe. And that's why, as somebody who likes storytelling, writing about someone who is described as ordinary, I always cringe a little because nobody is ordinary. Every person contains such a rich, complex story the external facts of their life may be very conventional or ordinary.
Right.
But within that, it becomes deeply complex and fantastic.
Yeah, the deeper you go, the more fascinating it becomes.
Yeah. Actually, it was funny because the other day I was in Seattle because I'm on this endless book tour. I think, and we're now in what city? Summerlin. Okay. But I had a driver taking me to my event, and he was really tall, very tall. And I
what are we talking?
like
6'6"?
7,
No, he
6'8",
wasn't 7
6'9". And I thought this guy has to have been a basketball player. Anyway, we start talking. He's from Senegal. He had come to play basketball in the U.S. Then he got injured. And, we're talking. He's telling me his whole story. It was so interesting. Also, I thought, if you're in Senegal, what's Seattle like where it's raining all the time and you're coming from a hot, dry climate? Anyway, we arrive at my event, and I thought, oh, damn it. Like, I don't want to get out of the car. I'm so interested in hearing this guy's story. It's so fascinating. And what he had taught himself English, watching YouTube. I thought, wow, that's amazing.
I love that.
And this was a chance encounter that anybody can do. You don't have to be a writer to connect and learn other people's stories.
Yeah, I mean that is something that cities kind of foster a little bit. I mean, whenever I would get out of a car in New York, somebody would Uber me to the airport, and by the time I get out, I'm like, I think your daughter is just going through a phase.
Right.
Here's a book they should read. I'm praying for your son's wife. She should get pregnant. I think it's just
Right.
I mean, by the time you get to the airport, you're like, this person's whole life, and it's so fascinating, and people are so resilient and mighty and brave. You don't really have that quite the same way in areas as beautiful as this, but we're not quite as condensed. But
and you maybe don't have as many of those kind of moments of forced intimacy.
Happy collisions like that. Yeah.
But I like to point out that while I may do this professionally and I enjoy it and I never hesitate in asking people questions, I feel like they don't have to answer. If they don't want to, they don't have to answer.
It's just a question.
But that the practice of curiosity is available to anyone.
I love that. So, and I agree. So is it just a matter of, like, if everybody here wanted to take away some tips just to be a more curious, open, alive person? Like, what are your tips for that?
Well, I think two things. One, that I feel like you could do as a practice to learn something new every day. It can be something incredibly small, incredibly focused, but, we get out of the habit of learning. And if you set out deliberately to say, I'm going to learn something new today, whatever it is, it's a wonderful way to kind of flex that muscle of curiosity and learning. But I also think that the idea of taking the risk, because a lot of people are not comfortable saying to their driver, I notice you have an accent, where are you from? The great thing is that I have almost never had anyone say, how dare you ask me a question? People actually love telling their stories.
Yeah.
They love feeling that you're interested in them and
being witnessed in their full humanity that way. I agree.
And it's something that a lot of people feel shy or awkward or feel that they're imposing, but that's never been my experience. I've never had any, except for one person, I will say, and I have to tell you this because it was really funny. Years ago, and I wrote a lot of Talk of the Town pieces for The New Yorker, and those are the sort of shorter pieces in the front of the magazine, kind of city observation. So I happened to be in Queens, and I saw a sign in front of a little shop that said, Lemon Ice King of Corona. I was in Corona, Queens. And I thought, oh my God, this I don't know why it tickled me. And I thought, I've got to write about whoever owns the shop, who considers himself the lemon ice king. You know, the people sell lemon ice all over New York. And, you know, usually a business would be quite delighted to be written about in the New Yorker. So I show up the next day and I walk into the store and this man is up front, the king.
Yeah.
And I said, hi, I'm Susan Orlean. I'm with the New Yorker, and, you know, I'd like to write about your shop. And he said, no press. And I said, what? And he said, sorry, no press. And I thought, wait, surely we are, yes, there's something is not computing here. And I was so stunned that I just stood there. I'm thinking, what do you mean no press? Like, I'm giving you
the
free
New Yorker,
advertising. Yeah. And he started talking, explaining how everybody wants his lemon ice recipe. He's got to really limit how many people he talks to. This is very important.
It's like the soup Nazi. It's like the soup Nazi.
Yeah. So he continues for an hour. Talking nonstop, explaining everything about the business and why he can't have press and why he's constantly being hounded, you know, on and on and on and on. Finally, I had to interrupt him and say, you know, I'm sorry, my meter ran out. I've really got to go. And anyway, I ran the piece as one sentence that went on for like 1,000 words.
Genius.
But it was so funny
genius.
Because by saying no press, he was also revealing to me that he considered himself extremely important.
Yes.
And too important to take press requests.
Yes, but as long as you're standing here, he'll talk to you for
he
an
would
hour.
go on and
yes.
on and on.
Oh my God,
And
I love that.
That was probably the only time that I had someone literally say to me, no, I won't talk to you.
That's
and of
hilarious.
course, he talked.
Proceeded to talk to you. Yeah.
Talked and talked and talked.
So we've talked a lot about your writing, which I love. But people write in solitude, and people read in solitude. But a very big part of your creative life has also become writing for, you know, being in a writer's room. You've had your 2 adaptations made. So one literally called Adaptation and the other one Blue Crush. So tell me, how do you feel from being sort of a solitary writer to becoming, you know, kind of collaborative in these other storytelling modes?
I love collaborating, and sometimes I look back and think I would have probably been very happy to be collaborating as a more constant part of my life, because writing, as much joy as I get from it, and I really do, it can be very lonely.
Yeah.
It's you and you alone.
Yeah.
Nobody can help you. And even if you explain what you're working on and try to brainstorm with someone, it's still truly solitary. When I've collaborated, I feel like how wonderful to share the agony and the ecstasy with other people who are all in the same boat as you. And I love teamwork. I like being in that environment. And I feel fortunate that I've gotten some of that added into my life. I really do love it.
It seems like it finds you, really, though. It doesn't seem like you're out there looking for it. It just kind of seems to find you.
Right. In fact, almost entirely. I really have never sought it, but when the opportunities have come to me, I've thought, wow, this is
Meryl
so much
Streep,
fun.
play me? Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
Sounds good.
Yeah. And I think now I'm actively adapting the library book for television.
Oh,
working
cool.
and working with a writing partner, and I'm in a way that I haven't before. I'm seeking out that kind of situation, and it's really been fun. It's really been great.
That's wonderful. I love that. I'm excited to see that turned into a TV series.
And, you know, it's interesting because I think LA, so many people work collaboratively in LA, and it's just very much part of the culture in Los Angeles because everyone in the TV and film business is working in collaboration. Nobody is working alone. So it's very much kind of part of the ethos of Los Angeles. And I have a wonderful writing partner who's a director, writer, and yeah, we're really excited about it.
Wow, I love that. Well, we can't wait. So we here at Godmothers define a godmother not as somebody who is given to you at birth as your religious, protector, but as somebody who watered the magic seeds inside of you, told you something about you was special, maybe pioneered a path. So I wonder, when I give you that definition, does somebody come to your mind?
Yes, and this might be surprising. It probably would even be surprising to her. But what came to mind immediately when you asked me that question was Tina Brown, who was my editor for a number of years at the New Yorker.
And you actually talk quite a bit about that experience, so I'm surprised. So say more about that.
Yes, well, Tina was initially, when she came to the New Yorker, which was in 1992, I wrote the kinds of stories that she absolutely wanted to eliminate.
To the extent that actually she used your story as an example of the kinds of things that she wanted to eliminate.
Right. I mean, she had a meeting with the sales staff and said, you see this Susan Orlean story about a grocery store in Queens? We won't be doing that anymore. And so when I went in for my first meeting with her, I thought, we are not going to get along. And I was pretty downhearted since I had dreamed of being at the New Yorker, but I thought, it's just not going to work. To my surprise, she said, here's your contract, there's your office, get to work. To her credit, I think she thought, show me what you've got. Her first, the story she assigned me right off the bat was a profile of Mark Wahlberg. And, it's exactly the kinds of story I did not want to do. Yeah. But I thought, let me see if I can skin the cat. I'll figure out a way to do this. I proposed to her that she said, I want you to do it right away because he's only going to be hot for about 10 days. And
so a psychic she's not.
Yeah. But she
a godmother she was.
Yes.
Continue, yes.
And I'd like to think that a godmother doesn't always just tell you you're the greatest person in the world, but tests your mettle.
Yeah. Shows you what you're made of.
Yeah. And so I thought I need to prove to her that the quirky stories that I like to do, I can do them. I can pull it off. I can make readers care about these things that are not big, dramatic stories, but I can make them work. So it was a challenge that was pretty profound, and it was either going to work or I was going to wash out, and I put my heart and soul into showing her that I could do these stories. So it's not that I wasn't trying hard before that, but I knew that I had to persuade her. I had to win her over and make her realize that even though that these were not the stories that she automatically thought of, that I could do them well enough that it would work for her. So she really tested me.
I love that. I love that. And how did the relationship grow as a result of that challenge?
It was actually a wonderful harmony where I felt like I understood what she wanted, but I also knew what I wanted and that we would make it work. Yeah. And we got into a rhythm where she would suggest a story to me, and if I felt some kind of level of interest in it, I would do it, and then I would quickly suggest a story.
Buy one, get one free. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we got into this rhythm where I think she was much more willing to let me try these stories that had her thinking, not quite sure. She's the person who said, okay, when I came home from Florida and said, I just read this weird story about a guy who's arrested stealing orchids out of a swamp.
Wow.
And, I don't really know what the story is. And she said, well, go ahead, figure it out.
That's
Go see
beautiful.
what the story is. So as much as she was a challenging boss and a challenge to my sense of myself, ultimately I felt really great at having risen to the challenge of saying to her, let me show you what I can do, and let me show you why it's worth it for you to say, yes, keep doing what you're doing.
Amazing. And it kind of revealed yourself to yourself in that process too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was good to make me think, all right, why do I like writing these stories? And what, can I really justify writing these somewhat eccentric stories? And I think it was like trial by fire. And I came out of it thinking, yeah, I really believe in the stories that I care about. And I'm going to show her why I care about them. And we ended up having an incredibly productive, really good relationship.
Beautiful. I love that. All right. Well, I'm going to open it up to you guys. I'm sure you have so many questions for Susan.
I have a question about, do you think that she actually ever read any of your stories? Or just that, well, this is the New Yorker, and she's writing about a grocery store.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. I think she might have very easily looked at the New Yorker and said, why would there be a story about a grocery store, just without even reading it? But also, I don't know whether at the time when they first approached her about taking it over, whether she sat down and read industriously many issues. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the New Yorker's been around 100 years. She would have had a lot to read.
A lot of work, yeah, exactly.
But I think it's a perfectly legitimate question, and I don't know the answer.
But I mean,
okay.
Mark was so popular that she thought she was going to get this personality piece, and you gave it to her, not the one that she thought she wanted, but the one that was absolutely
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out. Yes, back there. I have to repeat the question for Substack. Yes, go ahead.
Two questions. One friend of mine asked me to ask you a question. She said, ask her why she didn't write the book about Keiko the Orca from Free Willy. She did a ton of research on him, and I think she had a book deal.
Okay, why didn't you write the book on Keiko from Free Willy?
Oh my God, who is your friend?
Her name is Joette McDaniel. She's a writer. She was good friends with Harper Lee.
Oh, that's so interesting because, I didn't even mention it in the book. And later I thought, oh, I totally forgot about that. There's a very specific reason. I had done a story for the New Yorker about what happened to Keiko, the whale who played Willie in the Free Willy movies. Yeah. And it became a bit of a scandal because the movie is all about freeing a whale and letting him go out back into the ocean, when in fact Keiko was living in a horrible
Like a SeaWorld,
aquarium
right.
in Mexico, and a miserable aquarium. So it was a fascinating story because there was this upwelling of support, and the whale was moved first to Oregon and then to Iceland, and it was quite a saga. So I had written a story about it for the New Yorker and thought, this is a great story. I want to develop it into a book, and I had a book contract. Someone else was at the same time working on a book about the same subject. And he had a pre-existing relationship with the guy who was running the effort to release Keiko. And I thought, I'm swimming upstream. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to be...
You want the story to be told. It's not like it has to be told by you necessarily.
And I felt like it was going to be a real problem to be reporting with this guy always there in every environment, and with him having this other relationship. And I have to tell you, I'm sorry that I made that decision.
Oh.
I just, thought I don't want to deal with this.
Did the other book ever come out?
It did, but it
came and went. Yeah.
It came and went.
It wasn't written by Susan Orlean, right?
No, and
Okay.
I went on to write another book, and everything is fine, but I was sorry that I understand perfectly well why I backed out, but and maybe there wouldn't have been a way to do it comfortably, but it was because of this other guy. And I just thought, I don't want to be involved.
Charles, I can't think of his last name, lives in Mission Canyon, was the man that was involved here. Did you know in Santa Barbara in saving the whale?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I can't think of his
Is that your second question?
No.
Okay.
I worked at Condé Nast Traveler in the 80s for Harry Evans, and then also ended up working a little bit at Vanity Fair for Tina Brown, but I never saw her. I was low on the totem pole. But Harry, who I adored, told me she was the most brilliant woman person that he knew. Did you find her to be extremely brilliant, particularly brilliant?
Harry Evans described Tina Brown as the most brilliant woman he ever knew. Is that how you found her?
Oh, she's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And she had she had an incredible knack for the zeitgeist. She just had a kind of fine tuning for kind of perceiving the world.
At a time. Yes. Oh, Riley, sorry. I'll come to you afterwards. Yes.
I love that you're from Shaker Heights in Cleveland. I have a few tender, special connections to Shaker. And I was thinking about you being from there, and I was thinking about some of the luck that you talked about in your career. I'm curious if you think, as a writer, you built your voice from your childhood and maybe from your place of origin, or do you think you found your voice outside of that place?
Okay, so she's asking if you built your voice, or you found your voice. Shaker Heights being your home, did you build your voice there, or did you find your voice when you were out in the world?
That's a great question. I think finding your voice as a writer is as evolution. And what you're always aiming for, as it happens, is to return to the most authentic, maybe even the voice that you started with, that you're kind of coming full circle. Growing up where I did, in the kind of community I did, I think had a huge influence on me, and certainly my parents had a huge influence on me in terms of being curious about the world, being open to the whole variety and range of people in the world. So that part of what constitutes my voice definitely was based in my childhood, really my childhood and young adulthood, influenced by my parents and by the community I lived in.
Love that. Yes.
I'm going to go back to when you were that confident young lady in Oregon. Who taught you how to write? What were the lessons you learned about writing? And when did you know that you were not just a skilled writer, you were a crafter of writing?
Okay, so who taught you how to write? When did you know that you were a crafter of writing? Not just a skilled writer.
I believe that I learned to write by reading. I think that the models that I devoured, everything from reading Life magazine when I was a little kid, but then moving into the whole era of Joan Didion, Tom Wolfe, Joseph Mitchell, John McPhee. That's really how I learned to write, was looking at those models and having them begin to teach me what nonfiction writing was all about. I never trained as a journalist. I had a fabulous mentor for my first important editor who instilled in me the principles of journalism. But literally learning how to write was reading great writers. I'm not sure that there was a moment when I thought I've transcended, crafting, writing to something beyond. I feel like I'm always learning, and I have certainly gained a lot of confidence, and I have the confidence now that I can figure things out, that I can edit myself really well, which is an undervalued skill, and one that I think is really essential, is editing your own work. And
Well, having lost so many editors along the way from your book publisher perspective, maybe that was even teaching you to be even a stronger self-editor.
oh, absolutely. I mean, no question, because early on, not that I would wish this on anyone, but I went through 7 editors on my first book, so that eventually I was just sort of doing it on my own. I relied on friends who were great writers who read my work and helped me kind of figure it out. But to me, I have a pile of books on my desk that it's the same pile that I've had for years and years and years, and I turn to those all the time when I'm thinking, how do you transition from this part of a story to that part? How do you introduce a new character? I'll go back to my Calvin Trillin, John McPhee, Joan Didion, over and over until the pages are falling out. But that's how I've learned.
Beautiful. Another question?
Kind of a two-part question. The first one is, I find it really hard to edit my own work, and I think a lot of authors do. Do you have any advice on how to become a better self-editor? And kind of, in part, on that is writing memoirs a really personal act. How do you decide what to include and what to leave out?
Okay, so two-part question. First part is with memoir, how do you decide what to include and what to leave out? And with self-editing, how do you become a stronger self-editor?
Well, let me start with the editing question, because I think that's a really good question. I think a couple of things. Number one, I read all my work out loud. It is the best
You do that too, Diane.
way to edit yourself, because out loud you hear when a sentence is awkward, when you've overwritten, when something doesn't make sense.
Literally out loud, like Johnny, you
Out
hear
loud.
her literally reading out loud.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting in my office and I read it out loud, and if I sort of get bored, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
You know, you can have some objectivity when you read out loud that you can't have when you're sitting and reading.
Love that.
Every morning before I begin writing, I go back and edit what I wrote the day before, and I just look at it as, all right, I got it down yesterday, but today I'm gonna bring it up a level. The other thing that I do, that this sounds like a silly technique, but it has been very valuable to me. Nobody likes to cut something they've written.
Yeah. Kill
'Cause
kill your darlings.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
deep in your heart, you think, this is so brilliant. How can I cut this? But my way of tricking myself into doing it is I open another file, and if I cut something, I don't delete it. I move it into this other document so that I feel like exactly, it's your darling file. And so even though this sounds silly and performative, it actually helps, because you think, I'm not throwing it away. I'm taking it out for now. If I decide later that that didn't work, I just go and put it back in. And it allows you to be a lot bolder and think, yeah, let me try taking this out, or let me move this. And it's comforting to think it's not just going away. It's there if I change my
And
mind.
how often do you say you've gone into that darling file and put
Zero
something back?
times.
0 times. Okay,
Zero.
0
I mean,
times.
maybe once in a blue moon. But the comfort of having it there,
that
I
makes a
can't
lot of
tell you
sense.
how effective that is. And it's, I think you need to get really loose when you're editing yourself and have feel that you can play a little. don't be so tight and worried, but just think, oh, I'm going to try it this way. Well, I'm going to try it that way. And just play around. And the thing that most people, when they first start writing, is, you know, they struggle, they get down a first draft, and then they think, oh my God, you know, I can't touch it because it was the result of so much labor. The looser you get, the more you're willing to say, let me kind of play around, let me see it, putting the end at the beginning, you know, the better self-editing you'll do. And the better you edit yourself, the better you will be as a writer. Absolutely the most valuable thing you can do.
Excellent advice.
As far as deciding what to put in and not put in a memoir, I think that was a question every sentence of the book. That, you know, is this important? How personal do I want to be? Does this even matter to a reader? At some point, I think you have to just picture yourself in conversation with someone who kind of knows you but doesn't know you that well, and have a conversation in which you tell them who you are. And create in your mind this relationship that you're responding to. And that helps. It's the way if you were sitting next to someone on an airplane and had a conversation, you know how much to tell and what you don't tell. You have a very natural capacity to judge that. So you create a conversation with a reader who, you know, in my case, I thought chances are many of the people who are going to read this book have read my work already. So they have some idea of who I am, and that will inform how much more they want to know.
Yeah, beautiful. We have time for one more question. Yes.
I was wondering, because you've written about so many different topics, are there times you're like, oh, I wonder about orchids today? Do you go back to think of these past books that you've written about, and are you still curious about those things?
Are you still curious about stories you've written and books that you've written where you've finished the project, but do those subjects still make you curious?
Not at all. No.
Hard no.
No, to be honest, I almost never, I can't think of a time where I went back and wrote another piece on the same subject. And it's not that I can't or I won't or that I have no interest and I refuse, nothing like that. It's just that I tend to feel that I said what I want to say on that particular subject, unless I am wanting to expand it into a book, which is different. You know, The Orchid Thief started as a New Yorker piece, and then I thought I do want to go back. I want to expand it. But usually, for me, writing is fundamentally an act of discovery. Once I know a subject, I'm not able to experience the discovery the same way. You know, I know it, I'm not entering it with that excitement and curiosity. So that's why I've certainly returned to category. I've written a lot about animals. So, you know, those stories just always interest me. But as far as going back specifically, I was asked many times to go back and write. I wrote a piece called The American Man, age 10, that I've been asked to go back to write about him at age 15, age 20, The American Girl, you know, and I just felt like, no, I've done it.
You left the door where you wanted it and it's finished.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not callousness at all. It's
completion. That
I feel done and that I'm comfortable just sort of moving on to the next subject.
Beautiful. Thank you, Susan. What a pleasure this conversation was.
Thank you all so much.
You're a marvel. We're going to get Susan to come back and teach us all a writer's workshop.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Will you stay and sign some books?
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So line up over there.